Hello and welcome. It's time to leave the day behind. Time to let go of all its thoughts, its worries, and its demands. Find a comfortable position now, perhaps nestled under the weight of a warm blanket. Adjust your pillow. Let your shoulders soften and release the tension from your jaw. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be, except right here in this quiet space we've created. Take a slow, deep breath in, filling your lungs with calm. And as you exhale, let it all go. Feel the weight of your body sinking gently, comfortably into the surface beneath you. Tonight, we are going to concern ourselves with grand battles or the dramatic lives of emperors. Instead, we are going to travel back in time to listen to a much quieter story. It is a story of order, of ingenuity, and of something fundamental to all life. It is the story of water. We are going to follow the journey of water to one of the greatest cities the world has ever known, ancient Rome. We'll trace its path from a misty mountain spring along the slow, steady gradient of an aqueduct and into the heart of a bustling, living city. It's a story of stone and engineering, yes, but it is also a story of life. The quiet hum of a fountain in a hidden garden, the gentle steam rising in a communal bathhouse, the lifeblood of an empire, flowing day and night, century after century. So close your eyes if you haven't already. Let my voice be a gentle guide, a soft murmur in the quiet of your room. There's no need to hold on to any detail. Just let the words wash over you like a slow, peaceful stream. Let your mind drift, and let us begin our journey to a time of stone and sunlight and the constant, soothing sound of flowing water. Our story begins long before the first stone of an aqueduct was ever laid, and far from the noise and heat of the city. It begins high in the mountains. Picture the Apennine Range, the long, stony spine of Italy. Imagine the air here, cool and clean. The world is quiet, save for the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant call of a bird. It is just before dawn. A soft gray light begins to filter through the trees, and a thick blanket of mist lies settled in the valleys below. As the sun begins its slow ascent, its first golden rays touch the highest peaks, turning them a soft rose color. And here, in a hidden grove, sheltered by ancient beech and oak trees, our journey truly starts. Water, pure and cold, seeps from the earth. It is not a rushing torrent, but a quiet, constant miracle. It bubbles up between moss-covered stones, trickles over smooth gray pebbles, and gathers in a small, crystal-clear pool. For centuries, this spring was known only to the shepherd guiding his flock, or the lone hunter tracking a deer. It was a place of deep peace, a sacred spot perhaps, where the earth itself seemed to breathe out life. The Romans called such a place a fons, a source, and they believed that every spring had its own spirit, its own minor deity or numen that guarded its purity. Long before Rome was an empire, it was just a collection of small villages on 7 hills, clustered near a bend in the Tiber River. For its earliest inhabitants, water was simple. They drank from the Tiber, they collected rainwater in cisterns, and they drew water from local wells and springs right there on the hillsides. But as Rome grew, so did its thirst. The river became crowded, and with a growing population, it became less clean. The city was becoming a marvel, but it was a thirsty marvel. And so, the great minds of the Republic turned their gaze outward and upward. They looked to the distant hills, to the mountains they could see on a clear day, shimmering in the heat haze. They knew that up there, in those cool, quiet places, was the answer. They knew that pure, clean water was flowing in abundance. The challenge was how to bring it home. How to convince a mountain spring to travel dozens of miles across valleys and through hills to serve a city. This was not a problem to be solved with force, but with patience, with observation, and with a profound understanding of the world's most basic law, that water will always seek its own level. It will always flow downhill. And so, before the first trench was dug, came the surveyors. These men were called grammatici, or libratores. They were not soldiers or politicians, but quiet, methodical masters of measurement and landscape. Imagine one such man standing on a hillside, looking out towards Rome. He is not looking at the view, not in the way a poet might. He is reading the land. He is tracing an invisible line in his mind, a line that will one day carry water. His tools are simple, yet ingenious. He has a groma, an instrument with 4 weighted strings or plumb lines hanging from a cross. It allows him to lay out perfect right angles, to map the land with precision. But his most important tool is the korobates. Picture a long, sturdy wooden beam, perhaps 20 feet in length, supported by 2 legs. Along the top of this beam is a carved groove, a small channel. The surveyor and his assistants would place the korobates on the ground and pour a little water into this channel. They would watch the water intently, If it settled perfectly level, they knew the ground beneath it was flat. If it tilted to one side, they would shim the legs with small wedges of wood until the water was perfectly still. Plumb lines hanging at each end offered another way to check. And so they worked, inch by inch, foot by foot. They would move the karabatis and measure again and again. It was a slow, meditative process, a conversation between the men and the landscape itself. They were searching for a gradient, a gentle, almost imperceptible slope. The ideal aqueduct did not rush downhill. A steep drop would cause the water to gain too much speed, to erode the channel, to damage the structure. No, the perfect aqueduct channel had a fall of only a few feet for every mile it traveled.
It was a gradient so slight you would not be able to see it with your naked eye. You would not be able to feel it as you walked. But the water would feel it. The water would follow it faithfully. These surveyors would spend months, sometimes years, walking the proposed route. They would make notes on wax tablets, sketching the contours of the land. They would look for the easiest path, a path that followed the side of a hill rather than cutting through it, a path that went around a valley rather than trying to cross it. But sometimes the land was stubborn. A mountain stood in the way. A wide, deep valley blocked the path. And for this, a different kind of thinking was required. The kind of thinking that would come to define Rome. Once the path was chosen, the great work of construction began. This was often the task of the Roman legions. In times of peace, the army was not idle. The same hands that could build a fortress or a siege engine were turned to these great public works. The discipline and organization of the military were perfectly suited to such a monumental task. Imagine a legionary, his armor set aside. He is not a warrior today. He is a builder. He stands in a quarry, the sun warm on his back. All around him is the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of hammers on chisels. They're cutting stone, huge blocks of limestone or tuff, freeing them from the earth.
These blocks are not crudely hacked away. They are shaped with precision, each one made to fit a specific place in the grand design. They are loaded onto heavy wooden carts, pulled by teams of slow, powerful oxen. You can almost hear the creak of the wooden wheels, the soft lowing of the animals as they strain, moving the stone piece by piece to the construction site. The true genius of Roman building, however, was not just in stone, but in their mastery of the arch and in their invention of concrete. Roman concrete was a wonder. They didn't just mix cement, water, and aggregate. They discovered that by adding a special volcanic ash called pozzolana, their concrete became incredibly strong and could even set underwater. So, for the great piers that would support the aqueduct across a valley, they would first build a wooden frame, a skeleton of what was to come. Into this frame, they would pour their mixture of mortar, water, and rubble. It was a slow, layered process. A layer of mortar, then a layer of broken stone, another layer of mortar, packed down tight. Day after day, the pier would rise, a solid man-made pillar of rock. And then came the arches. The builders would construct a semicircular wooden support structure called centering. Upon this wooden frame, they would carefully place the wedge-shaped stones of the arch, one by one, working from both sides towards the center. The final stone, placed at the very top, was the keystone. As it was tapped into place, a kind of magic happened. All the weight of the other stones, which had been pushing downwards onto the wooden frame, was now redirected. The forces pushed sideways through the arch and down into the massive piers. The structure was now supporting itself. The wooden centering could be removed and used to build the next arch, and the next, and the next.
Imagine the sight. A line of graceful arches marching across a valley. A testament not to power or conquest, but to cooperation, to planning, and to a deep, patient understanding of physics. It was a rhythm of work, a slow, steady pulse of creation that could last for years, even decades, until the structure was complete. But much of an aqueduct's journey was hidden from view. For every beautiful bridge of arches that crossed a valley, there were many more miles of channel that ran underground or through tunnels cut into the rock. Let us follow the water now as it leaves the daylight behind. It flows into the mouth of a tunnel. The air immediately grows cool and damp. The sound of the world outside fades away, replaced by a gentle, constant whisper. The sound of the water itself moving through the darkness. Here, in the earth's quiet embrace, the water is protected. It is safe from the heat of the sun, which could cause evaporation. It is kept clean, away from falling leaves or dust. Cutting these tunnels was grueling work. Miners, often slaves or soldiers, would work by the dim, flickering light of oil lamps. They would use iron picks and chisels, chipping away at the rock, foot by painstaking foot. They would work from both ends of a hill, hoping to meet perfectly in the middle. Sometimes they were astonishingly accurate. Other times, their tunnels would meet with a slight jog, a small stone correction, marking where two teams of men, working in near total darkness, finally found each other.
To provide air and light, and for maintenance, the engineers would dig vertical shafts down from the surface at regular intervals. Imagine being in that long, dark tunnel and seeing far ahead a single, perfect circle of daylight, a beacon in the dark. As the water flows beneath it, for a brief moment, its surface glitters and shines before plunging back into the cool, silent dark. The channel that carried the water, the specus, was lined with a special waterproof cement called opus signinum. It was made by mixing lime mortar with crushed terracotta tiles. This gave it a distinctive pinkish, reddish hue and made it incredibly resistant to leaks. The Romans knew that every drop of water was precious. And so the water traveled in its dark, protected channel, a hidden river flowing silently beneath fields and forests. It moved at about the pace of a person walking slowly. There was no hurry. There was only the constant,
gentle, inexorable pull of gravity. Along the way, the aqueduct engineers included other clever features. Before the water entered a long siphon or a particularly important bridge, it might flow into a large open basin. This was a settling tank, or piscina limaria. Here, the water would slow down, spread out. And as it stilled, any sediment, any tiny grains of sand or grit that had been carried along from the source would gently drift to the bottom. The water that flowed out of the other side of the tank was cleaner, purer. The tank could be periodically drained and the collected silt shoveled out. It was simple, patient, and effective.
And then there were the valleys. When a valley was too wide or too deep to go around, the Roman engineers had to cross it. They could do this in two ways. One way was the inverted siphon. This was a remarkable piece of engineering. They would build a header tank on one side of the valley, and from there, the water would be channeled into a series of large, strong pipes, usually made of lead. These pipes would run down the side of the valley, across the bottom on a low bridge, and then up the other side to a receiving tank. The receiving tank was set just slightly lower than the header tank, so the pressure from the water flowing down would be just enough to push it back up the other side. It was a closed, pressurized system, a brilliant solution. But the more famous solution, the one that has captured the imagination for 2,000 years, was the aqueduct bridge. Let your mind drift to southern Gaul, modern-day France. Picture the Garden River flowing through a deep green valley, and spanning this valley is the Pont du Gard. It is a vision of stone and air. 3 tiers of arches stacked one on top of the other. The lower arches are wide and massive, anchoring the structure to the valley floor. The middle tier is just as strong, but more slender. And the top tier is a line of smaller, quicker arches, and it is up there, 160 feet above the river, that the water flows. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend. It was built without any mortar for its main structure. The stones, some weighing up to 6 tons, were cut so perfectly that they hold each other in place through the sheer force of friction and gravity. Imagine standing beside it. The stone, warmed by the sun, glows a soft golden color. You can see the marks of the builder's tools. You can see the numbers they carved into the blocks to show where each piece should go.
It is more than just a bridge. It is a statement, a monument to order, to the idea that even the most difficult landscape could be tamed, not by force, but by reason and design. It served the city of Nimes for centuries, and as you look at it, you can almost hear the faint, distant sound of the water making its steady, peaceful crossing high up in the sky. This was just one of many such bridges across the empire, each a masterpiece of engineering, each carrying its precious cargo on the final stages of its long journey. And so, after a journey of 50, 60, sometimes even 70 miles, our water finally arrives at its destination. From a hill outside the city walls, you can see them, the great aqueducts, the Aqua Appia, the Aqua Claudia, the Anio Novus, converging on Rome like the spokes of a great wheel. They are the arteries of the city. As the water reaches the edge of Rome, it flows into a final grand distribution center. This was the Castellum Aquae, or water castle. This was not a castle in the defensive sense. It was a large, covered building, often beautifully decorated with mosaics and statues. Inside, the water from the aqueduct would pour into a series of large basins. Here it would pass through another filtering system and then be divided. This is where the true order of the Roman water system becomes clear. The engineers of the Castellum were masters of hydraulics. They knew how to control the flow and the pressure. Using a series of bronze gates or sluices, they could direct the water into different channels.
From the main basins, the water was typically split into three main streams. The first stream would feed the public fountains. The Romans believed that access to clean drinking water was a right for every citizen, and so the fountains were designed to run continuously, day and night. They would never be shut off. The second stream of water was directed to the great public bathhouses, the thermae. This was a huge allocation of water, for the baths were a cornerstone of Roman daily life. The third stream was for private use. This water could be sold, under license from the emperor, to wealthy individuals who wanted water piped directly to their homes or to businesses like laundries or market gardens. This was a source of revenue for the state. And the engineers had one more clever trick. The pipes for these three systems were set at different heights within the castellum. The pipes for the private users were the highest. The pipes for the baths were in the middle, and the pipes for the public fountains were the lowest. This meant that in a time of drought, when the water level in the aqueduct might drop, the first supply to be cut off would be the private homes and businesses. The next would be the baths. But the public fountains, fed from the very bottom of the tank, would keep flowing until the very last drop. It was a system designed for the public good, a system that put the needs of the many before the luxury of the few.
Let's follow the water as it leaves the castellum and flows into the city itself. Its journey continues in a network of underground pipes. These pipes, called fistula, were typically made of lead. The Roman pipe makers would take a flat sheet of lead and roll it into a cylinder, soldering the seam shut. They would often stamp the name of the owner of the pipe and the official who authorized it right into the lead. It was a system of accountability. These pipes ran beneath the stone-paved streets, a hidden circulatory system, and they would emerge at the hundreds of public fountains dotted throughout the city's 14 districts. Imagine the sound. In a city that could be loud and crowded, the sound of splashing, running water was a constant, soothing presence. It was the city's heartbeat. A fountain wasn't just a place to get water. It was the center of neighborhood life. In the morning, you would see women gathering, filling their clay jars, or amphorae, for the day's cooking and cleaning. They would exchange news, share gossip, watch over their children. A young boy might be sent with a small bucket to fetch water for his family's apartment, or insula. He might stop to splash his face in the cool stream, a moment of relief on a hot summer's day. The fountains themselves were often works of art. a simple stone basin, or an elaborate sculpture of a god or a mythical beast with water spouting from its mouth. The overflow from the basin didn't go to waste. It ran in a small channel down the street, washing away refuse, cleaning the city from the ground up. For the vast majority of Romans, the people who lived in the crowded apartment blocks, this was their water. It was free, it was fresh, and it was always there. A gift from the emperor, a daily reminder of the power and providence of Rome. It was a source of life and a source of community, all centered around the simple, beautiful sound of falling water.
Now let us follow the second great stream of water to a place that was, for many Romans, the center of their social world, the thermae, the great public baths. To call them bathhouses is to undersell them. They were more like colossal community centers. They housed libraries, art galleries, lecture halls, gymnasiums, gardens, and food stalls. But at their heart was the ritual of bathing. Let us step inside. The first room you might enter is the apoditerium, the changing room. Here you would leave your clothes in a small niche in the wall, perhaps under the watch of an attendant. The air is filled with the low murmur of conversation, the sound of friends meeting after a day's work. From here, you would typically begin a journey through a series of rooms, each with a different temperature. The Romans believed this progression of hot and cold was good for the health. First, the tepigarium, the warm room. The air here is pleasantly warm, a gentle heat that radiates up from the floor and walls. This was a room for acclimatizing, for relaxing. The floor is made of beautiful mosaic tiles, warmed from beneath by a clever system of heating called a hypocaust. Beneath the floor is an open space supported by hundreds of small pillars of brick. Hot air from a massive furnace, tended by slaves, is channeled into this space. It circulates under the floor and up through hollow tiles in the walls, heating the very fabric of the building. The engineering is completely hidden. All you feel is a gentle, pervasive warmth. It's a perfect place to sit, to talk quietly with a friend, to let the cares of the day begin to melt away.
When you are ready, you move to the next room, the caldarium, the hot room. The heat here is much more intense, the air thick with steam. There is a pool of very hot water for soaking, and often a basin of cold water for splashing on your face. This was the room for sweating, for opening the pores, for deep cleaning. An attendant might use a striggle, a curved metal scraper, to remove oil, sweat, and dirt from the skin. It is a place of deep physical release. The heat soothes aching muscles. The steam quiets the mind. And finally, after the intense heat of the caldarium, comes the shock and delight of the frigidarium, the cold room. Here you would plunge into a large, deep pool of unheated water. The water is fresh, clean, brought here directly from that distant mountain spring. The cold is a bracing shock to the system, closing the pores, invigorating the body, and clearing the mind. Emerging from the cold plunge, you would feel reborn, alive, clean. You might wrap yourself in a fresh linen towel and find a quiet spot in a garden courtyard to rest, or go to the library to read a scroll. The baths were for everyone. The emperor might bathe alongside the common man. It was a democratic space, a place where the city could come together to wash away not just the dirt of the streets, but the distinctions of class and rank. And it was all made possible by the endless, generous flow of water from the aqueducts.
But what of the third stream of water, the one reserved for private use? This was the ultimate luxury in Rome. For a hefty price, a wealthy senator or merchant could have a lead pipe run directly from the city's main water supply right into his own home, or domus. Let's imagine such a home. We step off the busy street, through a heavy wooden door, and into a different world. We are in the atrium, the central courtyard of the house. The noise of the city fades away. It is quiet here, peaceful. In the center of the atrium, the roof is open to the sky. This opening is called the compluvium, and directly beneath it, set into the polished marble floor, is a shallow rectangular pool, the impluvium. When it rained, the rainwater would fall through the opening and collect in this pool. But in this wealthy home, there is something more. A small, elegant fountain, perhaps of bronze or marble, sits in the middle of the impluvium. A thin, continuous stream of aqueduct water rises from it and falls back with a gentle, tinkling sound. This sound is the ultimate symbol of wealth and status. It is a sound of constant refreshment, a sound that says, "This house is connected directly to the mountains, to the endless supply of pure, clean water." This water would be used to supply the family's private bath suite, a smaller version of the public thermae. It would supply the kitchen, providing fresh water for cooking and washing. And perhaps most beautifully, it would be piped into the peristyle, a hidden garden at the back of the house. Picture this garden. It is surrounded by a covered colonnade. In the center are flower beds, fragrant herbs, and perhaps a few small fruit trees. And woven through this garden are small channels of running water and another, larger fountain. Here, in the heart of a crowded, noisy city, the owner could sit. He could read. He could listen to the buzzing of bees and to the gentle murmur of his own private water supply. This was a world away from the shared experience of the public fountain or the communal bath. This was water tamed for personal delight, a private oasis, a small piece of the mountain spring brought right to your door. It was a level of comfort and convenience that would not be seen again on such a scale for well over 1,000 years. But the journey of our water is not yet over. After it has filled the basins of the fountains, heated the pools of the baths, and graced the gardens of the wealthy, it has one final duty to perform. All of this water, millions of gallons arriving in the city every single day, had to go somewhere. And the Romans, in their endless foresight, had planned for this as well. The city was built upon another river, a hidden, man-made river, the great sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima.
This was one of Rome's oldest and most enduring pieces of engineering. It began its life centuries earlier as an open-air canal, built to drain the marshy lowlands that would one day become the Roman Forum. But as the city grew up and over it, it was covered, vaulted with stone arches, and transformed into the main artery of a complex underground network. The constant overflow from the fountains, the used water from the baths, the runoff from the streets, all of it was channeled into smaller drains that fed into this great sewer. The public latrines, which were also a feature of Roman life, were often built directly over these flowing channels. They were communal spaces, with long marble benches with keyhole-shaped openings, where a constant stream of water beneath would carry all the waste away. And so the water that began its journey in a pure mountain spring now had a new purpose. It became the city's cleanser. The enormous, continuous volume of water flowing from the aqueducts created a powerful, flushing current through the sewer system. It swept the city's waste out from under its streets, keeping Rome remarkably clean and sanitary for a city of its size. Pliny the Elder wrote of the Cloaca Maxima with awe, describing it as a feat of engineering more marvelous than the pyramids. He tells of how it had endured for centuries, surviving earthquakes and the weight of a collapsing city above it. This final part of the water's journey was not beautiful. It was not celebrated with fountains or mosaics. It was hidden, deep underground. But it was perhaps the most important part of all. It was the system that allowed 1 million people to live together in one place in relative health and comfort. Finally, the Cloaca Maxima would empty its contents into the Tiber River, further downstream from the city. And the water, having served its purpose, would rejoin the river and flow out to the sea. Its long journey was complete.
For almost 1,000 years, this system worked. The aqueducts were the pride of Rome, a symbol of its ability to create order and provide for its people. The office of the water commissioner, the curator aquarum, was a prestigious post held by some of the empire's most capable men. They oversaw a vast staff of engineers, masons, and maintenance workers who constantly patrolled the lines, clearing the channels and repairing any leaks or damage. But empires, like all things, do not last forever. As the Western Roman Empire began to decline in the 5th century AD, things changed. Invasions and civil wars meant there was no longer the money or the centralized authority to maintain these vast, complex systems. The great aqueducts were a target for invading armies. Cutting an aqueduct was a way to lay siege to a city, to cut off its lifeblood. The Goths cut the aqueducts of Rome during their siege in the 6th century. Some were repaired, but the expertise was slowly being lost. The channels became clogged with silt. Arches, weakened by time and neglect, began to crumble. One by one, the great arteries of Rome began to fail. The flow of water, which had been so constant for so long,
slowed to a trickle, and then, in many cases, stopped altogether. The effect on the city was profound. Without the constant supply of fresh water, the great baths had to close. The fountains ran dry. The sewer system, no longer flushed by a powerful current, became stagnant.
The city began to shrink. The population, which had once been over 1 million, dwindled to perhaps 50,000 or less. People abandoned the high hills, which were now without water, and crowded back down to the banks of the Tiber, just as their earliest ancestors had. They drank from the river once more. The magnificent ruins of the aqueducts were left standing in the countryside, long, silent lines of broken arches. They became a picturesque feature of the landscape, a playground for shepherds, a quarry for local builders seeking stone. For 1,000 years, they stood as silent reminders of a forgotten age, an age of genius, of order, and of the simple, profound understanding that water is life. And yet, the story doesn't quite end there. The knowledge was never entirely lost, and in the Renaissance, when popes and engineers sought to restore Rome to its former glory, they looked to these ancient ruins for inspiration. They studied their gentle gradients, their sturdy arches, and they began to build new aqueducts, often following the very same paths the ancient surveyors had mapped out so long ago. And so the water began to flow again. And now, our journey is over. The story is told. The great city sleeps, and the water continues its timeless cycle. The mist still gathers in the mountains at dawn. The rain still falls, seeping into the earth, to be born again in a quiet spring. And the idea of that steady, gentle flow can be a comfort, a slow, steady, peaceful flow. Let that feeling of gentle movement wash over you now. Like the water in the tepidarium, let a feeling of pleasant warmth spread through your body. Let your limbs feel heavy and relaxed. Let go of the day. It is in the past. There is only the quiet of this moment, the soft darkness behind your eyes, the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, in and out, a slow, steady, peaceful rhythm, like the water flowing through the dark, quiet earth, protected, safe. There is nothing to do now, nothing to think about, just the feeling of sinking deeper and deeper into comfort, into rest. The aqueducts stand silent in the moonlight, and you can rest. The fountains of the city are quiet now, and you can rest. The story is finished, and it is time to sleep. Let my voice fade away. Let the world fade away. Just drift on a slow, gentle current into a deep and peaceful sleep. Sleep now. Sleep.